Welcome to the cold, clear waters where the big brutes lurk, to massive woods, wetlands, and wide open country where big game trophies, elusive game birds, and all living things reside. Welcome to a world where the exciting challenge of outdoor adventure takes away tensions and the time clock never ticks. Welcome to another educational outdoor video, custom produced by Dave Winkelman Productions with you in mind. Come along for explosive fishing action and never-to-be-forgotten hunting trips. Whatever the creature, we'll be your teacher. And that's not all. We'll be meeting the gurus of the great outdoors, guides and outfitters, conservationists and tournament pros. So, at least for a while, put everything else aside, sit back, relax, and let the wonders of a wilder world take you wherever you want to be.
Just about Labor Day, when the season's trying to make up its mind what it wants to be, the weekend warriors start hanging up their fishing rods for the year. And that's when a lot of savvy bass fishermen chuckle. Want to know why? Fall is the time when the bass start to prowl, and you're most likely to encounter some really big dudes. For this time of the year, there are several key patterns that'll help any fisherman zero in on some of the most incredible bass fishing you can possibly imagine. And that's exactly what this tape is about. We'll touch most of the bases, tapping into the last of the bass-holding cabbage weeds, the phenomenal fishing during a frog migration, and a very effective pattern for when the water turns cold and the fish are sluggish. In a nutshell, we're going to tell you how you can extend your personal fishing season and catch some real lunker bass in the process. Hi, I'm Dave Winkelman, and thanks for joining me on this special video. It's special to me because I take it real personal. You see, I'm a bass fishing fanatic, and nothing winds my clock like catching a big old bucket mouth. And in fall, my chances of bagging a real trophy are better than at any other time of the year. You see, as summer begins to burn out, the bass go on a feeding binge to fatten up for winter, and of course I'm right out there among them, serving up some delicacies they simply can't refuse, provided I fish the right patterns. Yep, there's those words again, patterns. I guess you might say I'm the official spokesman for pattern fishing. It's my key to real fishing success. Okay, I sure might get skunked every now and then like anybody else, but year in and year out, pattern fishing has never let me down. Now listen, pattern fishing is really a two-headed critter. One head is location, which simply means where the fish are and why they're there, and the other side is presentation, things that you've got to do to catch the fish once you find them. Hey, I know you want to get out in the water as bad as I do, but first, let's quickly list the cause and effect relationships in nature that cause a fish to be in a particular location doing a particular thing. Number one is the nature of the fish. In this case, the largemouth bass, a predator built to take on prey of many sizes and shapes. Number two is season. Here, it's obviously fall. Number three is structure, or the shape and terrain of the bottom of the lake. If you will, four is cover, or anything that sits on top of it. For example, today we'll be fishing both underwater weed beds and lily pads. Now the fifth location factor is food balance or available forage, and here the bass are after minnows and big frogs. Number six is local weather patterns, and number seven is outside influence of man. Human activities that affect the fish and their environment, things like speedboats or pollution or flood control. Okay, now that's the location part of pattern fishing. And as I said earlier, the second part of pattern fishing is presentation. Simply put, presentation means the tools available and the proper technique or how you use them. Rods, reels, lures, lines, depth sounders, things like that, they're all tools. Pay particular attention to the kinds of lures we'll be using. Spinnerbaits and jigs tipped with minnows and pork baits. You'll see one presentation that involves ripping a jig through sunken weed beds to trigger fish when they're really off to bite. And another trick is fluttering a spinnerbait down through openings, tiny ones, in the middle of lily pad beds. Well, I hope you get the idea. The point is, in fall, bass follow different patterns of nature than they do in summer. And that's exactly where a lot of guys go wrong. They hammer away at the same old spots that work for them in summer and don't find any fish. But if you do it right, fall bass fishing can be absolutely unreal. Just watch this. You know, if I could pick one month of the year to fish, particularly for big fish, it'd be the month of October. Now, it gets a little nippy out here and you got to dress for it. But there's a lot of fish going in fall. But you know, I found over the years in talking to guys, there's been a number of guys that have went out in fall and just not had really good luck. And the problem is, I think, is that they're fishing the same areas or same type of areas they're fishing in summer. Now, the lake we're going out on today, we've got a beautiful afternoon. It's late October. I haven't been out here in a long time, although I fished the lake before, but let me give you an idea of the kind of spots they're going to, because they're still in the home area where they were this summer, but they've concentrated and they've moved deeper, and they're in some specific spots, primarily inside turns where you're going to have green weeds. Let me show you what I mean. And you see this point here? You see where it says emergent vegetation? That's the kind of a point that holds a lot of bass in summer, but in fall they're going to move off of that point to these tight inside corners right here. You look down in the bay here, and the whole thing is kind of an inside corner, but here you'll notice that it drops faster. If you can find green weeds there, you'll probably find some fish. Here's another major area right here. You see the big flat? Okay, and there's a big point off it. There's two inside corners. But you notice how it drops faster in here than it does over in this side? That's going to concentrate some fish. Now, you could have a little inside corner right out here on the point. Most of the weeds out here, however, are going to die, because when they're dying, they give off carbon dioxide, and that's what moves these fish off of here down to these areas. Here's another prime one, right tight into shore, and that's excellent. Got weed growth, got tight inside corner. That's the kind of area we're looking for. Let's go out here and take a look at it once and see what we can do. I'm going to be running a jig and a minnow. To me, that's kind of like a fish finder. Let's give it a shot. Now, the reason I picked this spot, there's a big food shelf out here. This one happens to be shallow enough that there's a lot of reeds and so forth up on the top, and the bass use it an awful lot in the summertime. But then, you know, like I said, in fall, when the water starts cooling, gets below 52, 50 degrees, something like that, those fish will start moving out down on the breaks. We got a nice tight inside corner here, and all those fish that use that area have got to go someplace. They're down in this deeper water. Now, don't get discouraged if you don't find them right away in one spot. Because like I said, they're going to be bunched up, and I mean bunched up tight. Answer to that is get a good bait. A little jig and minnow for me is just like a fish finder. I know I can catch fish on it, just about any species in fall. Well, let's see what else is around. Darn it, this spot should hold some fish. Don't be afraid to move around a lot. You may have to hit several spots before you find an inside turn the fish are using. But once you do, they're usually stacked in there like cordwood. Okay, actually I stopped just a little bit short of this break here. There's a little point and then there's a big one. There's a real tight inside corner right over here. And it comes off of a nice point where there's generally a lot of fish in summer. Let's see. I don't like to come in blasting too fast, at least like to cover water, but you want to always try and stop short of where you're going to fish on that inside corner. Because with bass, you might sometimes have some of them sit way up on top of the weeds, and just shortly after you cast it, they might smack it. So I like to stop a little bit short and then sneak on in with the electric. Depends upon the mood of these fish. If there's going to be any fish here, they should be right up here. It's right where that thing hugs the closest to shore and she drops the steepest. Now the object is simply, you're throwing it out and you want to make sure that your cast lands well up on top of the break, right up on the very top side of that inside, and then you just kind of drift the thing right down over the top of the weeds. Now, it's important as far as I'm concerned, at least for this type of presentation, to have a graphite rod. A good sensitive one, because as soon as you touch the weeds, you're going to have to be able to snap it right over the top, just kind of flick it off. You want it just kind of doing this, coming down the top of the weeds. If you get inside of the weeds, you're going to get tangled up, you're going to lose minnows and so forth. Oh, got a little one. What do we got here? What's a bass? Oh, little feller. Come on, guy. Well, hold still here. Here. A cute little fish. Kind of small, but lots of fun.
But a lot of times when you're popping that bait right off the top of the weed growth like that, they'll just kind of pick it up. They'll come from behind, they'll pick it up, and they'll swim with it a bit. And you got to be waiting for them. They'll pick it off that weed line, they'll just swim right at you, and sometimes you can't even feel it. The only way you can tell you got a hit then is that you can't feel the weight of your jig for a second. That's why I'm always trying to keep that jig so I can feel it in the line taut, but not real tight. Just so you know what's going on. That's the key. You've got to be mentally able to picture what's happening with that jig under the water, and you've got to be able to physically feel it with your rod here. There we go. Come on, guy. Oh, I got in a bunch of them here. Bunch of little bank runners. There's got to be some good fish here somewhere. Hold still. If you want to go back into the water, you have to give me just a second here, guy. And another little bank runner. Let's keep moving. Too many little fish here. There's got to be a spot where there's some big fish up, because those fish are hitting. They're active. And that's what I'm looking for, is the mood of the fish right now. I want them to be active. And they seem to be. There's another spot right on up over here. Right there. Remember that tight inside corner I showed you on the map? Right by shore. That should hold some. Oh, that's a good fish. Ooh, that's a good fish. Ooh. Oh. Now. Oh. That's 6 pounds. It's got to be at least that. Man, you just about straightened my jig out. That's what fall fishing is all about. Boy, that's a beautiful fish. I don't care where you're fishing in the upper Midwest. A bass this size, look at a mouse on it. He's about big as my hand. Bass this size is a beautiful fish. Beautiful fish. That's what this fall fishing's all about. You know, big fella, why don't you take off? Now, the duck hunters can go do their thing in fall, and I like duck hunting as much as everybody else. But you get out on a day like this, you got the whole day to yourself. There's nobody else out on the lake, and the odds of getting a brute like that are pretty good. Try this fall pattern. I think you'll enjoy it.
Okay, let's recap it and show you how it fits into the pattern principles. Location. The water is cooled to near 52 degrees and the fish were moving deeper, generally following weedy inside corners of shoreline structure, especially near large flats where minnows congregate. Presentation again, we're talking tools and technique. I used a jig and a minnow sneaking up with my electric trolling motor. I cast right up on top of the break using 8-pound monofilament line and a 5.5-foot jig action graphite rod that enabled me to feel the jig hit the tops of the weeds. When it did, I'd flick the jig off with quick short snaps, keeping a tight line so I could feel the bass as well as the weeds. Hey, and that's important because the bass would swim right up behind the jig and take it and then swim right along with it for a second. So anytime the jig felt weightless, I'd rear back and snap set him. And you saw the results. Okay, that's one fall pattern. Now here's another. This one's kind of surprising because it involves a shallow water location at a time of the year when normally you might expect the bass to be deeper. But in this case, the food balance was the key. The leopard frogs were in their annual fall migration back to the lake, and you guessed it. They're among the lily pads the big bass were waiting. Big guys, too. So I figured that spinnerbaits like these cast into the openings of the lily pad to do the trick. Hey, the pattern was absolutely deadly. Would you believe 42 bass all over 3 pounds in one day? And how about a half a dozen of them over 6 pounds? This, you've got to see.
Out. Oh, I love it. I just love it. Get out of there. Ah. Sorry about that, guy. Fat little bass. Nice fish. Good bass. You know, spinnerbait's got to be the most versatile lure a bassman can throw. And today I got kind of a double treat for you. We got a unique pattern going. It's obviously fall, and it's one of those beautiful Indian summer afternoons. And a lot of the frogs start running into the lake, into the marshy areas like you're seeing here. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at an area. The bass will come up in here after those frogs. We're going to look at a pattern of how to do it, catch them on a spinnerbait. But at the same time, I want to go through a number of the little techniques and tricks and little tidbits and things that you can do to make your spinnerbait fishing more versatile and more effective and utilize it in more waters. Quite frankly, I don't know of anything that's more versatile as far as fishing any kind of a cover goes than a spinnerbait. Oh, he must have it around 1,000 pounds of pads. Come on out of there. These boron rods are strong. You can horse them through just about anything but this guy. Come on, fish. Thought you were going to get away, didn't you? Well, sorry for foiling your plans, but nice bass. Of course, I don't know if I've ever caught a bass that's not a nice bass. I love them all. Now, see if Mama's around in there. Now, because of the nature of the frogs and the fact that they like to always head for the marsh areas, you're going to find them in areas like this filled with pads and rice and bulrushes and every kind of a tangled weed that you can imagine. You're going to get hung up some, there's no question about it. But the spinnerbait can work through about any of this kind of cover and work in some back alleys with some other little tricks I'll show you and just be devastating on the bass. For example, this pads in front of us up here. Now, when you're working the pads, I'm working a single spin. Let me show you that first here. It's a big single spin, 3/8 ounce, yellow with a copper blade. That's just because it's early in the afternoon. Later in the afternoon, I might go to a darker color. But I've also got a big piece of ripple rind off the back of it. Well, you can see there, it's a big-looking bait. That's a long lure. Just kind of slithers through the water. Now, this time of the year, the bass are feeding the fat, and so I want a big bait. And I want something that I can work slower. The addition of a little bit of pork rind on the back leaves it ride a little bit higher at slower speeds than it would without the pork rind, so that's another plus. Because the bass are going to be in shallow water. These pads and that grass over there is a good example. Now, you can see, as soon as I'm getting to a big thicket of pads, I'm just kind of nudging the bait right on up over the top, and as soon as it falls, just letting it drop down the pocket and then picking it back up again. Working it back up through that stuff. It's one of the reasons I've used a single spin spinnerbait as well. Because when it gets to the edge of the pads and you scoot it over the top like that, it'll just flutter and drop right on down. Sometimes on that drop is when you see the line take off to the side. You don't even feel that, just boom, and it's gone.
Now listen, not everybody knows that frogs do migrate back into the lakes in fall. But it's sure no secret that frogs prefer marshy areas, and that's just what you'll be looking for. And hey, frogs need cover just as much as bass do, so there should be lily pads, wild rice, reeds, cattails, bulrushes, or something back there. And the bottom should also be soft and mucky. That's what the frogs will be looking for to burrow into for the winter. Once you've latched onto such a spot, remember it, because you can expect the same thing to happen under similar conditions next year.
One other thing, anytime you're running a spinnerbait, particularly in this kind of cover, you've got to have a bait casting reel like that. Remember that bass I caught over there in the pads a little while ago? I'd have winched that fish out of there. With a spinning reel or a spin cast, it just couldn't happen. These new bait casting reels too, boy, that you can throw them about all day long and hardly ever have a problem with backlashing. Oh! One back of the edge of that rice. Ah! Oh! This feels like a better bass. Even 9 pounds of wild rice. Head for the weeds, why don't you? I can skip you through there. Sorry about that, guy. Oh! He's a better fish, aren't you? I'm glad you had that spinnerbait good. Well, go back and have some more fun, big guy. Another area you sure don't want to overlook, even though it might seem like it's pretty clear and bright out. There's back alleys like this. You see how I'm buzzing that bait? Kind of gurgling it right underneath the surface, creating a wake. Every time I come to an alley or a big trough or a cut like this in the pads or a big open pocket, I'll make a couple of 2 or 3 casts in there and just let it buzz right under the surface. Watch that buzz in action again. You see what I mean? Just so you're kicking a wake in a little V right behind that spinnerbait. Just making it gurgle as it comes through the water, but not breaking the surface of the water. Just barely breaking it. Oh, boy, that's a good fish. Oh, that's a big fish. Come on, baby. Oh, I love big bass. Don't wrap that line around there. Don't cooperate, we'll get you anyway. Now, where are you? I know it's a good fish. Oh, I can see him in there. Oh! Get out of there. Ah! Oh, that's a beautiful bass. That's the kind of fish you can catch on spinnerbaits consistently. Be it fall or be it any other time of the year, spinnerbait's probably one of the bass fishermen's best friends.
Okay, now, you've seen how the food balance, in this case the frogs, can dominate some of the other factors in determining bass location. My presentation called for these tools: a quiet trolling motor for a quiet approach. Hey, fish in shallow water are spooky. I used a heavy action bait casting rod, a 1553 Shimano with a real strong backbone, and then spool it with 14 to 17 pound line. Remember, those are big bass you might be dealing with, and you'll have to horse them out of that cover. So you'll need to set the hook long and hard and then drag them, head out of the water across the surface. Spinnerbaits have worked real well for me, as you just saw. And in this case, it was a 3/8 ounce yellow single spin with a hammered copper blade. I usually tie the spinnerbait directly to the line with no other terminal tackle, and the piece of yellow ripple rind I hooked on helped add some size to the bait. All right, now, let's take a look at another late season pattern. Weedy cover figures in this one too, except the weeds are beneath the surface and the bass are in deeper water. And this time we'll be fishing broad-leafed weeds of several varieties that can be lumped under one name: cabbage. Although there were beds of narrow-leafed weeds around, they offered less cover and just didn't hold as many bass. So where were the bass concentrated? You're right again, in the cabbage, because that's where the most cover was. And hey, I'm talking about cover for bait fish as well as bass. It's the same old principle: structure, cover, and food balance. It works. Now, fishing with me in this segment is my old buddy Dan Nelson. Dan is a nationally known outdoor writer and promotions director for Lindy Little Joe Lure Company. Listen up now and keep my pattern principles in mind while Dan and I catch him on another favorite bait of mine: a jig, a weedless kind like this with a piece of pork rind hooked on the back, more often called the old reliable jig and pig. Woo! The fight of a largemouth bass is exciting, but it's even more fun when shared with a good friend like Dan Nelson. Dan is a walleye expert from North Dakota who equally enjoys bass fishing.
It's a good fish. Nice fish.
Well,
Nice fish.
not a football now.
I'm just doing that thing you did to me in that tournament one time. You threw one right out the other side of the boat.
Close to 4 pounds. 3.5 maybe. Just that little jig and pig, he just gobbled it. A porker. Here.
Where do you hit it, on top of the weeds or on the downside? Or?
Down at the base. Down at the base. Jump nice. We're right off that, just dropped into 20-some feet. There's right on the little side of that point. We're basically, in this deep water like we're fishing here, just fish them like a plastic worm. Let them swim down through the weeds with that weedless jig. You don't have any problem.
And just slow?
I like to kind of hop it and jump it, vary the retrieve a little bit. Sometimes slow, sometimes a little faster. We're right on the very tip of this point here. But just dragging a jig over the tops of the cabbage won't get it. To really turn on big bass, you gotta let the bait sink down to his level and then rip it through the weeds. That way the fish not only sees your lure, he gets all stirred up by the commotion, and more often than not, he'll slam your bait like you wouldn't believe.
you'd think that the bass were randomly scattered among the cabbage. But, as the old song goes, tain't necessarily so. Remember, the bass is a predator, a tiger in his own jungle. He'll generally wait in ambush along edges. In this particular pattern, the bass were holding tight alongside of the clumps of cabbage, and there weren't near so many of them in a bigger bed of coontail and milfoil that was nearby.
Where's he coming up? Ooh, good fish. Good fish. Oh. 2. You get 2 for that.
2 points.
2 points. Jump right into the basket.
Shot, right?
Right into the basket. I love it. Babe, isn't that rod a little light to be horsing those fish out of these weeds?
No, it's got, see? It's got a real light tip to it, Dan, but it's got a real strong backbone. It's a boron rod.
Boron? Oh, all right.
It's a boron rod. They react fast.
Yeah.
They've got a lot more power than a guy thinks.
Yeah, they do. They react quick.
I'm not sure if boron is better than graphite, but I'll tell you what, I do like this little rod. I used to have this tendency of going to stiffer and stiffer and stiffer rods and stuff, and boy, in the last few years, I've just been going back to lighter rods and enjoying the fish more and enjoying the fun more.
I've done a lot of ultralight fishing, ultralight fishing this year, and I really enjoy it.
I guess if I have my druthers, where's my marker? We're coming up that cabbage bed here again. If I have my druthers, is to the point now I'd rather catch them on the lightest rod I can. This one is, what's it rated for? It's a 5.5 foot. It's rated for a 1/4 ounce to 3/4 ounce. It's called a medium action.
The bass were located in thick cabbage in 10 to 20 feet of water. They were there because the cabbage was the right type of cover, and that's where the food balance relationship had placed the right kind of forage. The tools we used were jig and pigs. The jigs were 1/4 ounce Lindy leg jigs made especially for bass fishing in heavy cover. And the pig was simple pork rind, purple or brown in color, either works. Now we chunked these out on 5.5 foot jig action spinning outfits with 10-pound test mono. Other good tools for this pattern include polarized sunglasses to help you spot the weed beds fast, and a good sonar unit to tell you how deep you are and help in positioning.
No, it's more fun doing it this way.
That's a good bass.
Some decent fish.
They're all nice bass out here.
Yeah, there's good fish going
No
out
jumbo
here.
fish today.
Good fish going out here.
Last time I fished out here, we took a couple of them about 5 pounds.
I would like to take a 5-pounder. Where do you hit it?
Out right in the edge of the cabbage.
Have we just got scattered cabbage in here?
Uh-huh. There's a lot of coontail and milfoil. That's why I just threw the marker.
That's all I've been pulling up for the last 5 minutes.
That's right, but your last glob there, if you notice, what was it?
Cabbage.
That's right.
Whoa! Good fish.
Want some help with that one? No.
Yeah, here, you take it.
Right.
You just handle the net. I'll take care of the fish. Ooh, this is a good fish, eh?
Well, you know, you got to watch that line. You get too close to that net, it can sometimes cut it.
It's a nice fish. Nice bass. Nice bass.
He can really roll on the surface there too, can he?
All gone. Got a bigger net, you'd have had that one.
Hey, now that you've seen some of the good basic fall bass patterns, get out and try them. But remember, there are so many variables involved at this time of the year that you're bound to run into a lot more patterns as well. And that means you'll spend a fair amount of your time just figuring out how to master them. But don't be discouraged. Keep practicing and you'll do fine. But you need to take your practice as seriously as an Olympic athlete does. Practice doesn't make perfect, far from it. Perfect practice makes perfect. And one more thing you can practice is catch and release fishing. Sure, I keep some fish to eat, but more often than not I release them, and it can go a long way toward ensuring the future of our sport. Only buckets our time's already up, and there's not even a chance for one more cast. So tell you what, we'll see you out in the water next fall when most fishermen don't know what you and I already know, and they've hung it up for another season. And until then, everybody, hey, good fishing.